Think we're alive. Never know how to tell. Okay. So we're in the middle of chapter 44. And I think today, however interesting Tanya has been up until now, today we're going to be introduced to something that doesn't fly in the face of everything we've learned till now, but you'll learn something new today. I think that we didn't address until now, and I think might be game changing in perhaps in the long run. So I think we all assume that on a person's deathbed, the conversation they have with their family is going to be something of a something that, a conversation that's appropriate for the times, a message that a parent wants to leave for their children, etc. The fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, when he was on his deathbed, so his son, his only child, the previous Rebbe, was with him, and he turned to him and he said, I think it was literally the day of his passing, and he said, I'm going to heaven, but my writings I leave to you. Good morning. And the understanding of that is, and this is the way that Rebbe spoke about it many times, is that just like in the Ten Commandments, the reason, shouldn't say the reason, one of the reasons that God introduces himself with the word Anochi, which is unusual in Hebrew. Apparently, it's not even a Hebrew word. The Medrash says it's an Egyptian word. But the God introduces himself with that word is because that word, right? God says I, Anochi's I. All other times says Ani, right? Ani Hashem Elokecha. Anochi, because Anochi is an acronym for the words in Aramaic, Anon Nafshi Kitavit Yehavit. I, my soul, I have written and given. In other words, what God's saying is, I've written myself into the Torah. If you want to know me, you got to study the Torah. If you want to find me, learn the Torah. The same thing it says about the writings of all tzaddikim, of all great people, that when we learn their writings, we are connecting to them. The Talmud even says that when you quote something in the name of the person who authored it, their lips are moving in their grave. In other words, it's as if they're studying Torah themselves. God says it about himself, that anytime you learn Torah, I will sit down across from you and study with you. Which is why when we learn, we like to learn verbally. Because could you imagine, you learn Maimonides verbally, got Maimonides sitting across from you, studying with you. If you learn it in your mind, it's only in your mind. It's not verbally. When the previous Rebbe heard this, the previous Rebbe at the time was 40 years old. He was an only child, and this is in 1920. This is a very dark time for Jews in Russia. However dark Russia was for Jews up until that point, that was an even darker period. The future was really unknown. I don't think anyone imagined what happened, but it definitely wasn't an easy time. The previous Rebbe was became very emotional, very disturbed by what his father said. His father noticed it, and his father said in Hebrew, hispilus, moichin, moichin. Hitpa'alut. You know what hitpa'alut means? Hitpa'alut. Pa'al with pei ayin lamed, not tefillah or pilel. That would be the root of the word tefillah is pilel. Hitpa'alut means excitement, emotion. Emotion, excitement. Mochin. Brain. Mind. In other words, almost like, what are you getting so excited about? Have you forgotten everything I've taught you? Have you forgotten what Chassidus is all about? It's all about the mind. Why are you forgetting yourself? Why are you losing yourself? We've learned up until now that emotions are very important. And yet the Alter Rebbe chose to refer to his own way of teaching Hasidus as Hasidus Chabad, not Hasidus Hagas, which is what all other Hasidic groups are referred to, Hagas being the acronym for Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes. Chabad is Chachma, Bina, Das, which are the first three intellectual attributes of the 10 Sefirot. Chagas, Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes are the first three emotional attributes. Emotive attributes. Okay, so we're going to take a little break. We've been talking in the last few chapters about love. We're still talking about emotions, but we're going to take a little break about talking about how to get to emotions or how to create emotions or why they're important for a moment. And we're going to rewind a little bit. Why are we even talking about emotions? We're talking about love and fear. Last few chapters, we're talking about love. Why are we even discussing love of Hashem? And what should a person who doesn't have love do? So the reason, right, you would think I could be a religious Jew even without emotions. Well, I have to love God in order to just do I don't know if you told me or something. It doesn't. You don't have to believe in God. You have to act as if there is a God. Even if you don't believe in God, you have to act right. Someone. It's a quote from somewhere, right?
It is.
So the idea is it's possible to live a life in action, an action-based life that's totally kosher, even if your mind isn't totally there. Yeah, we're capable of doing that. So why do we need emotions? So we discussed already in chapter 38, I think, that the reason you need emotions is because if you live an action-based life devoid of emotions, that looks like a dead life. There isn't any way of creating excitement or energy in what you do without emotions. If you're not excited about something, you're not going to be doing it in an excited fashion. You can pretend up until a certain point, but you can't actually do a mitzvah with excitement if you're not excited. So, can you do a mitzvah without excitement? Sure, but it looks dead. It looks lifeless. What happens when you do a mitzvah? A connection is formed between me and God. Just like in a relationship between two people, if all we do in the relationship are the actions that the relationship calls on without any emotions, that's not a real relationship. Yeah, if you get gifts from all your coworkers, some of them really like you, and some of them just do it because they'll be cast out if they don't do it. You're not going to appreciate that gift. You're not going to develop a relationship based on that gift. Now, if you don't like them and they're giving you a gift because they want to have a relationship with you, that might be the opening of a beautiful relationship, right? But if they're doing it just because that's the thing to do, they don't care, that's not going to develop into a relationship. So can you live as a religious Jew without emotions? Sure. Will that pass to your children? Maybe yeah, maybe no. Will that be a real intimate relationship between you and God? Probably not. So therefore, it's important to have emotions. In mystical terms, we call this process wings, right? We said in order for the mitzvah to go up, to come closer to God, it needs wings. What are the wings? Love and fear. So when we say that in order to do a mitzvah, you need to have some passion behind it, some emotion, we're talking about love and fear. Why? Okay. And the reason, okay, based on this, what should be a very, very integral, important component of every mitzvah should be the emotions. Even though perhaps it's not necessary, because you could do a mitzvah without emotions, but it's almost unfathomable not to have emotions, because what are you doing long term for sure? However, so in other words, in the Torah, it should say that that you got to do a mitzvah with emotion. However, the Torah doesn't say that. The Torah says you got to keep Shabbos, you got to put on tefillin, you got to eat kosher. It doesn't say you have to care about it, you have to want it, you have to like it. It doesn't say anything. Why not? Because we are humans. And practically speaking, that's not possible. If the mitzvah was you have to eat kosher, you have to abstain from a cheeseburger, and you have to want to abstain from a cheeseburger, maybe not everyone's capable of doing that. Or maybe not everyone's capable of doing that all the time. And what is the Tanya based on? Which verse is the Tanya based on? That it's accessible to you. It's accessible to you to serve God in your mouth and in your heart to do it, right? So mitzvahs are accessible. If they're accessible, if their accessibility depends on emotions, half of the time I'm not in the mood. I do it anyway because I have to, but I'm not in the mood.
When you do mitzvah with an emotion, you raise it to higher level. If you're just do it like rote, then you're performing like it says in the Torah. But if you give your all, aren't you elevating it to the next level?
Correct. But it's not an integral component. In other words, when we teach kids in school, when we train them for their bar mitzvah, we train them as kids to serve God, we don't train them in emotions, we train them in action. It's not a necessary component, even though it seems very important. But why not? Why isn't it? And every time we've had this question, Alter Rebbe explains, because otherwise it's not accessible, right?
Question.
Yeah.
You say blessings on everything all day long. Isn't it like you're supposed to get to 100
Yes, 100 blessings a
a
day.
day?
Well, it's not that complicated. It's not that hard.
I know.
Just if you pray 3 times a day, you're already over 80 plus. You're already.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is that do you get emotional over all your blessings? When you
No,
bless
but you
your
should.
tea?
No, but you
I
should.
know, but do you?
Oh, so that's the
I'm
thing.
asking you a question.
No. And that's the
It's a
question.
habit.
And that's the question. The question is, if emotions are so integral, why aren't they part of the mitzvah?
Well, wouldn't they be, even if you're not in the mood, that's an emotion.
Yeah,
You're doing
but it's
something-
not an
It's a
emotion.
negative emotion, but
It's not an emotion that brings you closer.
yeah.
That's the emotion we're looking for. We're not.
Yeah,
We're not looking
Yes,
for
sir.
emotions. Just the term emotions. We're looking for an emotion that brings me closer to God.
Mhm.
Yeah, at some point. things-
Yeah, if I'm enraged that I have to do this, I'm emotional about it.
Yeah,
But that's not an emotion. That's not the emotion we're talking about.
Being apathetic about,
Apathetic is not an emotion.
Apathy is
It's
an
a
emotion.
negative.
It could lead to an emotion, but it's not an emotion.
Absence, it's the absence of emotion, maybe.
That's dead. That's like cold.
Yeah.
That's the lack of emotion. Right. It's the
Yeah,
absence of
right.
emotion. Now, are you emoting something? Perhaps, but that's the vacuum, right? That's not, you aren't creating something, you aren't feeling something, you're feeling nothing. You're not upset. If you're upset, you're not apathetic.
Yeah, that's true.
So
Apathy is almost like a numbness.
exactly. So it's the lack of anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, after a period of time, saying morning prayers and laying tefillin, it becomes a rote thing that you just do it. You don't feel excited when you're doing it. You get in the habit of doing it and you do it.
Okay, so there's two things to be said about that. The first thing is try. The problem with humans is not every time we try are we successful. So let's say we're talking about someone who tries. He tries to get excited about davening. It doesn't always work, and he's got to go to work. He can't just sit all day and try to get excited. He's got to at some point just open the siddur and start davening. And not every day is he successful in creating that excitement.
Would
So-
that be kavanah?
Yeah. That's exactly what kavanah is, right? Now, there are many levels in kavanah, but the intention, what am I doing here? But kavanah could be relegated to the mind. Kavanah doesn't necessarily have to invoke emotion. But seemingly, without emotion, you've got no wings. And without wings, the mitzvah stays here, isn't elevated, doesn't bring you closer to God. So the Alter Rebbe is going to teach us something now that I think might change our whole perspective. Assuming you have a built-up perspective on everything we've learned, can change your whole perspective on the relationship between study, what we're doing in Tanya class, and a mitzvah, and how important it is to study Chassidus and to study Torah, irrespective of whether that will lead to a mitzvah or not. Okay. No, we're not, before we read the text, the Alter Rebbe explains that, and this is perhaps in the words of the fifth Rebbe to the previous Rebbe, excitement, mind, use your mind. Unlike him, and this, again, the basics we've discussed many times. It's true, emotions we can't control. We're not always in control of our emotions. But intellect is something we can always be in control of. Sometimes it's harder, that's true. When you're sitting on a subway, for many people, it's very hard to sit and read a book and focus. But is it possible? Sure, it's possible. You know what you need to do? You take off your glasses, put in earplugs. That makes it a little easier. Sit in a seat where you can't see anything. Makes it a little easier. There are things you can do to focus your mind. Will that create emotions? Not necessarily. But as far as intellect is concerned, we are in charge of our minds. We can control what we think about and how we think about it. However, intellect, although it's controllable, has a disadvantage that it's not exciting necessarily. It might lead to excitement, but not necessarily. We spoke last week about two types of love. Love of one's own life and love of parents. Yeah? Some days, sometimes that love creates tremendous excitement. I'm very excited about my day, about life. Some days I may know that and it creates zero excitement. Right? So the Alter Rebbe already told us earlier in Tanya, and the Alter Rebbe says it a few times, he's going to say it here also, that anytime we speak about emotions, we always remember it's possible I won't be able to create these emotions. What do I do then? We're speaking about how important emotions are to mitzvahs and how only through emotions are mitzvahs elevated. But what happens on a day I can't create emotions? And what does the Alter Rebbe tell us? Think about it. Forget about if it'll create emotions. Think about it, that's enough. And now the Alter Rebbe is going to explain how that works. There is a saying in the Talmud, Machshava Tova, a good thought, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Almighty, mitzarfa lamaisa, combines it to action. What does that mean? What do you think that means? Some people think it means that what matters is the intention. I wanted to go to shul today. I didn't end up going. God will consider it as if it's done. But that's not what it means. What does it mean? Let's I'll say the words again in English. A good thought, God combines it with action. Doesn't say God considers it action. God combines it with action. What does that mean? That means that I have good thoughts and I have action, but there's no link connecting them. So I sit for a half hour before davening and I meditate about davening, about God, about what the mitzvah I'm going to do. And then I do the mitzvah devoid of all the meditation I had before. Now I'm davening, I'm not thinking about the meditation before. There's no connection between the two. There's seemingly no connection. What would happen if that meditation would have bred an emotion? Where that meditation would have created an excitement, and then I would have gotten up, opened the siddur, and davened with energy that I haven't davened until today. That prayer would have shot up. Those are powerful wings. That's thrust. Those are powerful wings. But if I have meditation and then it doesn't create emotion, and then I go do the action, there seems to be a divorce, a disconnect between the meditation and the action seems to be dead. Comes the Alter Rebbe and teaches us that when the Talmud says that a good thought, God combines it with action, it doesn't mean God is considering it as if you did it. It means if you had a good thought and you had action, but they were disconnected, as long as you had the good thought, God will connect it to the action. So the good thought usually should breed love and fear, it didn't, don't worry. As long as you did the mitzvah afterwards, God will connect the two. And so that will be uh, uh, like backup engines that God has that is assuming you put in the quarter, the engine works, even if you didn't feel the intention. Does that make sense? So, right. Okay, let's see. Let's see inside. We're holding page 676. It's 4 ER 30th of Nisan. Yeah. Okay. Even if it appears to him at first sight that this is an illusion and that in truth he does not possess. Okay, well, one second. You know what? I just realized we're in the middle of a chapter. Last week we spoke about two types of love that are natural within the person. Remember, the love of a father, a child to his father, and the love to life itself. Right? And we discussed how both of those loves, if you just use a little thought process, those loves are ingrained within us and they'll be revealed. Yeah. But what happens if you think about it and they're not revealed? My father did something nasty, he said something nasty the other day, and I'm thinking all day about how really I owe my life to him and he gave me everything and I should. It's just not creating love. What do I do then? Same thing with God. Yeah. I should love God like I love my life itself. Let's say today I'm not in love with my life, but I'm trying to think about how God is my life. I should love him, but I'm not. What do I do then? So even if it appears to him at first sight that this is an illusion, in other words, and that in truth he does not possess this love for God, and thinking that he does is nothing less than deluding himself as to his true spiritual status, I don't feel it. I don't got it. I'm thinking about it all day. I know intellectually it makes sense. I don't feel it. Maybe I'm just making this up. He need not be concerned because it is intrinsically the absolute truth, even without his own spiritual service, by virtue of the hidden love which his soul possesses for God. He has this love within him. The fact that he doesn't experience it or feel it doesn't change that fact. So why is it important to think about it and to reveal it? If it doesn't change the fact, if I love God whether I know it or not, then why do I have to feel it? I love him. But the benefit derived from the spiritual service through which he effects its emergence into the open is that he should translate it into action. And when his love is in a state of concealment, it cannot affect his actions. Right? So the point of revealing it is, then I'll do mitzvahs. If I don't love God, why would I do mitzvahs? Why would I waste my Saturday keeping Shabbos if I have better things to do? If I don't love God, if I don't care about God, why should I waste my Saturday? Right? So there's benefit to revealing this intrinsic hidden love. This means, how do I do that? This means being occupied with the Torah and the mitzvahs, which he studies and performs as a result of it. In other words, as a result of revealing this love, with the intention of causing gratification to God, like a son serving his father, who does so in order to cause him gratification. So I know why I should want to reveal this love. It'll help me be a better Jew, more observant Jew. But at the same time, it doesn't always work. And when it doesn't work, I might think, well, maybe it's not true. If I can't feel this way, maybe it's not true. Maybe I don't really have this love. Yeah. By the way, I'll go out on a limb and say, although I know that it's not always possible, but we're going to speak stereotypes. Someone is married to their soulmate, let's say. Yeah, imagine two Jewish people married to each other. They had a Jewish wedding. Everything is kosher, but the marriage isn't working. Whatever it is, I'm not talking extreme cases where there's abuse or it's just not working. They don't feel it. No matter how much effort they put in, how much they think about it, they don't feel it. Almost always, after a certain amount of investment, you say, okay, maybe it just doesn't work. Maybe it's just not real. Maybe it's not true. Maybe I'm not meant to be with them. In reality, though, that's not the case. That's not the case. Now, does that mean that it'll be easy? No. Does that mean that it'll always, that I'll necessarily be able to reveal that emotion? No. But does that emotion technically exist? In other words, emotion here, I'm referring to the emotion of that this is who I'm meant to be. This is my life. This is who I'm meant to be with. And if I like myself, I should, and if I want to learn how to live with myself, I should learn how to live with them. If I want to be a good parent, I should learn how to respect them as a parent. Yeah. If I believe that it's bashert, if I believe that this is the way God created two half souls that now separated and are coming back together, and the way we know that is if it's Jewish man and a Jewish woman marrying according, well, non-Jews is the same thing. But there are certain baselines, but it's much broader, obviously. There isn't a marriage ceremony necessarily, it's much broader. But assuming everything's done properly, this is the way it's meant to be. If this is the way it's meant to be, then it could work and it will work. Assuming you're willing to stand the test of time. The same thing with God. The fact that we don't feel it doesn't mean it's not there. And that's why if you ever want to argue with me and say, I'm not a religious Jew, I don't feel my soul, I don't one day you will. It's there. That will be my response. You don't want to wait? You don't have patience? I can't do anything about it. But that will be my response. I believe it's there. And one day you will tap into it some way or another. Concerning this, it was said that a good thought is joined by the Holy One, blessed be He, to a deed, providing it with the wings to soar upward, as explained earlier. In other words, if you have good thoughts, you meditate, you use your mind, the fact you didn't give birth to emotions doesn't change it. You do the mitzvah as a result. God will use the intellect as emotions. He'll consider the intellect as wings. The gratification he provides God is akin, by way of illustration used earlier, to the joy of a king whose son returns to him after liberation from captivity. Or God's gratification may be from the fact, this is concerning the love of a son to a father. Or God's gratification may be from the fact that it has been made possible for him to have a habitation among mortals, as already mentioned. Yes, either God's going to be satisfied with the fact that his son has returned from captivity. In other words, even though he doesn't feel it, he's still doing it. He thought about it, he thought about it, he thought about it. It didn't create emotions. He should have felt despair and go home, and he decided not to do it anyway. That's a son coming home from, that creates such joy in God. But then also there's the mitzvah element of it. You made the world a place that now God can feel a little more comfortable there. That also creates a nachas to Hashem. Even in regard to the above mentioned love of the category of my soul I desire. So this is all with regarding to the first level of love, the love of a son to a father. Even in regard to the above mentioned love of the category of my soul I desire you, it is readily possible to bring it out of its concealment into the open through constant practice with mouth and heart in full accord, so that one's heart should feel what his mouth utters about God being his true life. However, even if he cannot bring it to the love into a revealed state in his heart, yeah, you meditated all day. You couldn't bring the love out in a revealed way. Nevertheless, he can occupy himself because of this love in the Torah and mitzvahs for their own sake through portraying the idea of his love in his mind, and a good thought is united by God. There was once a chassid that came to the Alter Rebbe and complained. There's another chassid, and it's not a Chabad chassid of a different Rebbe. And this chassid, every day when he davens, you see the fire coming out of his soul. And me, the chassid tells the Alter Rebbe, I learn chassidus every day before davening. and I meditate about God, I meditate about the mitzvah and about the Jew, etc. Then when it gets to davening, I don't always manage to have that excitement. What do I do? What do you think the Alter Rebbe told him?
Doing what you
Do
do,
it
and it'll
anyway.
come later.
The Rebbe said, you think that Chassid's davening? That Chassid's not davening. His Rebbe is davening. What's he excited about? Excited because his Rebbe told him to be excited, so he's excited. I want my Chassidim to be excited to daven. Alter Rebbe wanted us to create the excitement within ourselves. That was and is the difference between Chabad and other Hasidus. The other Rebbes, the other Hasidus, the primary focus was the Rebbe would inspire the Hasidim to do the right thing. As long as you're inspired by the Rebbe, you see, it's a little different today. Today, every Shabbos I print stories of people's interactions with the Rebbe. 100 years ago, 80 years ago, this would have been unheard of in Chabad. To speak about the Rebbe's greatness or miracles or these things, unheard of. There's a letter from the Rebbe to his father-in-law published in a yeshiva publication in the 30s in Poland, the Chabad yeshiva, where the Rebbe asks his father-in-law to explain why in Chabad they don't focus on miracles. Why there's no focus on miracles that the Rebbe performs. There's a whole lengthy letter in response. Chabad was never about. Chabad is very much about emotions. We want to create emotions, but it's not about emotions. If it's about emotions, so if my intellect isn't working, I go to the. However, I can create emotions. Yeah, I'll give you an example from if you will, from popular culture. You have people that get excited about a certain athlete, actor, singer, whatever, and there's a certain bond that's created, a certain excitement that's created. And anytime you see the person, or you hear their name, or you see a picture, something you see of them, it creates an excitement in you. That's obviously a very materialistic base excitement. Translate that to something spiritual. Let's say someone is infatuated with a Rebbe, with a Torah, with a mitzvah, and every time they see anything of that, they're excited. There's an excitement. That could be a very positive thing. If you're a religious Jew, and you have something about Judaism that excites you to that extreme, all you have to do is employ that thing, and you'll be excited for the rest of your life to do only mitzvahs and study Torah. Do the right thing. And for thousands of years, the Torah, God, that was enough. Came along the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov came in a time where people were really morally, not morally immoral, but like more in morale. How would you say it? They were morally dejected. Again, not immoral. They weren't immoral. They just, I don't know. Is that the way to say it?
One way to say it.
Yeah. Okay. Anyhow, you get the point. The point is they felt abandoned almost by the Torah, by God. So the Baal Shem Tov came and to inject life into Jews and into Yiddishkeit. And primarily the way it worked for the Baal Shem Tov, for the Maggid, and for all the other Hasidic dynasties was to continue that electrifying, energizing idea. The Rebbe himself would be connected to God, would work on himself, would understand what's going on. And the Rebbe would create an excitement. How do you create excitement? You perform a miracle for someone, suddenly everyone knows now it's excitement. It's excitement. It's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. But that wasn't the path Alter Rebbe took. Alter Rebbe felt this path isn't enough because it won't fundamentally transform the person. Not fundamentally transform, turn them into something else, but turn them into who they're really capable of being. It won't, that's not called service. You want to speak about someone who's serving God? That's not service. That's the Rebbe serving God through you. Or you serving God with the Rebbe's soul. That's not you serving God. Now, the Rebbe wanted that we should be part of the process. We should be the process. And therefore, Alter Rebbe introduced Chabad. That no, we have to, God gave us a mind, we have to use it. Now, the benefit of using it is it will lead to emotions. The problem is it won't always lead to emotions. And there are many days where it doesn't lead to emotions. And when those days happen, we don't want to fall back on emotion, on the Chagas style, because we want Chabad. So what do we do then? So Alter Rebbe says, don't worry about it. If you do the process, even if the emotion didn't give birth, God considers it an emotion. God considers that thought an emotion. So, two types of love. We have the love we spoke about in the beginning of this chapter, instinctive love. Yes, I need to meditate a little to bring it out in the open, the love of life and the love of a child to a parent. I need to meditate to bring it out, but it's an instinctive love, it's a natural love. And then we have the loves that we create, which we spoke about previously, right? Ahavat Olam and Ahava Rabba. Ahava Rabba is really a Ahava that's a gift from God, but an Ahava that we create through meditation. What's better, or what's better? The instinctive love, in other words, revealing the natural love we have, or creating a love out of intellect, out of meditation. Creating. So usually, the Alter Rebbe and Tanya prefers the love that's created. Why? Why do you think so?
Comes from within.
Oh, it's who you are, right? You're transforming who you are. Till now, you were a human who was in love with whatever brings me pleasure. If I become in love with God, if I'm in love with God because I came to it on my own, I created that emotion. Now I'm a different person. If I thought about my love to life, so yeah, right now I'm a different person. What happens tomorrow when I don't feel that? I'm not. But if I created a love within me, if I thought about the universe and I thought about God and I thought about how great God is, how little I am, and that God cares about me, and I fell in love with God, that can be a much deeper love. The love of a spouse can be much more deeper and internal than the love of a parent to a child. It's not more natural necessarily. It won't necessarily withstand the same trials and tribulations, but it comes from a much deeper place in the heart. Perhaps not in the essence of the soul, but it comes from much deeper place of who you are as a person, from your living experience. It's a choice you made because of something you decided. You came to on your own. If I love God just because that's my nature, there might not be a difference between me and an animal. Animal also loves things out of its nature. Some animals love their kids. Some animals love their spouses. Some don't, right? Some don't have spouses. Some just every year it's a different animal, but some do. And some will do anything for them. Some love their parents. Some don't. But love isn't unique to the person. So if a person loves God just because that's his nature, it doesn't make him much better than an animal. So usually the Alter Rebbe prefers a love that's born out of intellect. However, oh, by the way, this is why angels are referred to as animals, right? Chayos HaKodesh, the holy animals. Why are they called animals? Because they were created to do, they do what they were created to do.
They can't create for themselves.
Yeah, they can't change, they can't develop. Okay, comes the Alter Rebbe here and says, no, there is a benefit to the natural love also, to the instinctive love also. Why? Because even though it's true, it's instinctive, and therefore could be construed as animalistic, but that's only the way it is naturally. But what do we say? We said it's usually concealed. How do I reveal this love? Through meditation. In other words, in a certain sense, I'm creating the feeling of that love. I'm not creating the love because I'm a child to God, regardless of if I meditate about it or not. But till I started meditating about it, I didn't think about it. So yeah, it was there, but it wasn't operational. If I can turn this love operational, and I'm doing it because of my meditation, not because someone stuck a sword to me and a knife to me and said, God, bow down to this idol or I'll kill you. And that, right, because we learned in Tanya, that has the ability to draw out this instinctive love. Assuming that didn't happen, I drew out the love with my own intellect. Then what makes this love different than a different love that I create with intellect? The fact that it already existed before, who cares? The fact that I'm feeling it now is because I worked on it. I drew it out. I thought about it. I created it. Again, you didn't create it out of nothing, but you created the feeling of love within you. Till now, you didn't have this feeling. Now you do. That's your creation because you thought about it. So this is something that we see that in the instinctive love, it's not that much different than the love that's created. Now, again, if the instinctive love is felt because of some external reason, then you lost the point. You don't have the benefit of what an internal love that I create has. But assuming you created this love, it's also much easier love to come to because it's instinctive. It doesn't demand as much meditation. I mean, we spoke about it last week. Even if you didn't necessarily agree with me 100%, but you could see the light in such a way of thinking that God is, in other words, assuming God created the world and assuming I have a soul and assuming, then God is my life. It seems quite logical. The same thing is with the love of a child to a parent. It seems quite logical. It shouldn't take as much effort to get to than a totally new love you're creating. And therefore, this is a good place to start. In other words, if you want to have the benefit that Tanya gives us of working on yourself, of true service, starting with trying to reveal the instinctive love, the natural love, is a good place because you got the benefit of both worlds. You got an easier meditation going for you. The love already exists. You're not creating something new. You're just revealing it. The Alter Rebbe is going to use some Kabbalistic words, which we already used before. So I'm just going to introduce them and then, reintroduce them and then we'll read the text. So we spoke before that there are four worlds, right? Atzilus, Beriah, Yetzira, and Asiya. We're in Asiya, in the lowest world. Asiya is the world of action. When we do a mitzvah, assuming there's zero emotion, in other words, no wings whatsoever, where does the mitzvah land? It stays in us. It stays in action alone. Asiya. However, the world above action is the world of Yetzira, the world of formation. When a person has feelings, feels a love to God, so then the mitzvah is elevated to the world of Yetzira. Bria is seen as the world of intellect. Besides emotion, I also had intellect that gave birth to emotion, the mitzvah is elevated to the world of Bria. Atzilus is the world of unification. There, it's only God himself. In other words, if I've reached a level where I'm so one with God that the mitzvah is just for God, there's no intellect emotion, it's beyond that, then the mitzvah rises to Atzilus. At first glance, it seems like if you had meditation, but the meditation didn't translate into emotion, and then you did the mitzvah, where does the mitzvah land? No, it stays in Asiya because you did the mitzvah you did without emotion. Doing it with intellect shouldn't seem to do anything to it. If the emotion was with intellect, then it rises above. comes the Alter Rebbe and tells us, no, when you do a mitzvah with intellect, even though the intellect didn't translate into emotion, the mitzvah is still elevated. Let's see that. Page 680. We're 5 year or 1 year and a leap year. The said two categories of love, what were they? That of my soul, that knows how much I love my soul, the love a Jew feels for God upon realizing that he is his true life, and that which is like a son loving God as one true father. These are the two categories. Though they are an inheritance unto us from our patriarchs, and like a natural instincts in our souls, and so too as a natural instinct is the fear that is comprised in them, namely the fear of being sundered, God forbid, from the source of our life and our true Father, blessed be He. So even though these two loves are natural, they're an inheritance, we get them by birthright, they are nevertheless not termed natural fear and love unless they be in the mind and thought alone and in the latency of the heart. Then their place is in the ten sefirot of Yetzirah, the place and level of the natural emotions, to where they raise up with them the Torah and mitzvot of which they have been the inspiration and cause. But when they, the 2 degrees of love, are in a manifest state in the heart as a result of his contemplation, they are called in the Zohar Re'uta de Liba, the heart's desire, which is a more exalted love than natural love. And their place is in the 10 Sefirot of Bria, where they raise up with them the Torah and mitzvot of which they have been the cause. In other words, which have been performed with the ardor of this love. I just want to pause for a second before we continue. I know I've had this conversation with someone. I don't remember the gist of the conversation, but we got to a point where they said, "Yeah, but I don't believe in this, or I'm not convinced." And I think they themselves asked the question, I still don't know why I have a mezuzah on my door. They couldn't explain to themselves why would they have a mezuzah on their door if they don't believe. Couldn't explain it. Okay? That's the first level here. In other words, you have the love and fear, you just don't experience it. How many kids, how many 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, even 40-year-olds think about their will to live? Maybe today a little more, but generally speaking, when does a young person think about, do I want to live? I don't think so. That. On a regular basis, even on a non-regular basis. How often does someone think about the fact that they want to live? They have a love for life.
When you're sick or you're dying.
So does that mean you don't have it?
Always in there, but it doesn't.
And it's not just in there deep down sleeping. It drives every day. It's driving you to get up in the morning and go to work and have a family. It's driving everything you do. And yet you had never thought about it. You may not even think you have it. If someone said you have a love for life, you may say, no, I don't love life. You do. How do you know you do? When you're put to the test. But really, every day, just by getting up, getting out of bed and going to work, you're showing you have it. The same thing with the Jew. The Jew may not do many mitzvahs. First of all, they may not know you have to do mitzvahs. Even if they do, they may think it's optional, or they may think it's ancient, because that's how they were raised. They were raised the Torah isn't relevant today, or the Torah, the way it was relevant 3,000 years ago, isn't relevant today. But Yom Kippur, they'll go to shul. Why? Because their parents went. So they know it's relevant. So they go. They have a mezuzah on the door because their father had a mezuzah on the door. So they know it's relevant. So this love and fear, is there. But if it's only there and it's not felt, then you're right, the neshama doesn't go up. For sure not to Bria. It may go up to Yetzirah because there is emotion there, you just don't feel it, but it's there. However, if you bring this emotion out, now you've created emotion. Now it can be elevated even to Bria. Why? Why is revealing this emotion considered intellect? It's instinct. It's an instinct. It's a natural love. Why are we calling this an intellectual born emotion? For their emergence from the latency and concealment of the heart into a state of revelation comes through the faculty of das. In other words, through a powerful fixation of the mind and an intense concentration from the depths of the heart, powerfully and frequently, on the blessed Ein Sof, as to how he is our very life and our blessed true Father. And since his contemplation is so powerful and deep, moreover, what is written in the Tikkunim is well known, that there in the world of Bria nests the supernal mother. In other words, the level of Bina of Atzilus, which in terms of man's spiritual service is the contemplation of the infinite light of the blessed Ein Sof, the giver of life, blessed be he. And this is in accordance with the teachings of Elijah and Tikkun Zohar in the section beginning Patach Eliyahu. Bina is the heart, and with it the heart understands. This means to say that the meditation and understanding taking place in the mind illuminate the heart. So, based on what we said, the two loves, natural loves, the love of a child to a parent and the love of my own life, have both the benefit of being natural loves and both the benefit of being meditational loves, intellectual emotions. Let's call them that. So now the question is, why do I even need the emotion? Let me just meditate. If God's going to consider the meditation emotion, if the meditation alone, even if it doesn't give birth to emotion, is enough, so why even need them? Why do I need the emotion? The whole reason we needed the emotion was to give wings, to give flight to the mitzvah. But if meditation gives that flight, why do I need the emotion? Why does Chassidus put such an emphasis on studying and learning Chassidus, on understanding, if it doesn't always breed emotions? So the first reason is there is a difference between the love that you get when you decide to love something. Oh. There is a distinction between the love that you feel when you decide to give birth to that love, in other words, you came to that conclusion, or a love that comes naturally, like to your own life or your. What's the difference? The difference is the love you have to life or the love you have to your parents, 99% of the time does not create a passion. It might create a love. It might extend itself even to being willing to sacrifice your own life for your parents. But it'll never create a fiery, burning passion. Now, Rebbe is going to coin that later in future chapters, like a burning, in Yiddish, a flacker, a fire isn't just going straight, but a fire is
A bonfire? A conflagration that.
no, but it's like it's a raging fire, a raging flame. A love of oneself, a love of one's own life, or a love of one's parent will not create a raging fire. However, when you're in love with someone, a love with a spouse, someone that you decided to love because of your intellect, that has the potential to create a raging fire. So even though it's true that my natural loves have the benefits of both being natural and therefore easier to get and intellectual because I give birth to them, but you'll never get to the level of love that you can create on your own. And that's why we still should strive. Al Rebbe still puts a full emphasis on most of Tanya. The emphasis is not on the natural love, on creating an intellectual love. Because that's where the light is. That's where the excitement is. There's also it's also can be seen as desire, yearning. You won't use those terms to your own life or to your parents. You use it to a spouse, though. A passionate desire. Okay, let's see that. Furthermore, these two categories of love that have been referred to above, the love of my soul and the love of like a son, incorporate a quality of love which is greater and more sublime than intelligent fear and love, the kind that result from contemplating God's greatness. The love termed ahavat olam. These two kinds of love also partake of the quality of avarabba, which is loftier than ahavat olam. Sorry. Yeah. Nonetheless, person must strain his intellect. So even though this has all the benefits, nevertheless, a person must strain his intellect to apprehend and attain also the above mentioned level of ahavat olam, which stems from an understanding and knowledge of the greatness of God. That's an intellectual love. Why? Why is it important to have the intellectual love if the natural love can also be an intellectual love? In order to fan the blaze of the fiery love with glowing coals and an intense fire and a flame that rises heavenward, so that not even many waters, which are enemies of the love, can extinguish it, nor rivers quench it. If I rely on the love of my father or the love of myself, then on a day that it's too hard, I may just give in. If I have a fiery love and passion, there's no way I'm giving in. For there is a superiority and excellence in the quality of love burning like fiery coals and an intense flame, which comes from an understanding and knowledge of the greatness and transcendence of the blessed Ein Sof over the two categories of love referred to above, when they are not like fiery coals and ablaze, but merely result from feeling or contemplating God's closeness to a Jew inasmuch as he is the source of our life and our true Father. The superiority of this love is similar to the superiority and excellence of gold over silver, and so forth, as will be explained later. Later in chapter 40, I think 50 says that the reason why fire is the same like gold is and water is like silver, right? Water is cold. Water is stationary, or goes down, whereas fire is constantly striving to go up. And that's what he says, that the natural love is more of a love of I'm content with where I am. There's no passion, there's no desire. So again, even though, yes, it's a man-made love, so to speak, I have to create it. It doesn't have the benefits of being a natural love. By the way, he does make mention of the fact that the natural love can also become a passionate love, but not necessarily. If it stays in its natural state, it won't necessarily be a passionate love. Besides, this is the whole man, and his raison d'être, reason
for living.
Right, but I don't know how to pronounce it exactly. That one, in other words, this is our whole purpose for being, that one may know the glory of God and the majestic splendor of his greatness, each according to the limit of his capacity, as is written in Raya Mehemna, Parshas Bo, in order that they may know him, and so forth as is known. At the end of the day, it says in the Torah, that you should know today that God is your God. King David says, know God and bring it to your heart. In other words, there is an idea of intellect, of knowing God, even if it doesn't lead to a mitzvah. So if you think, I'm not going to start keeping Shabbos, maybe I shouldn't come study Torah, maybe I shouldn't come learn Chassidus. No, I think eventually it'll lead to that, but that's not the point. Well, I shouldn't say it's not the point, but it's not the only point. Part of the Zohar says, although it's not the reason that the Alter Rebbe takes later, but the Zohar says one of the reasons God created the world was that he should be known. If God is alone in the world, then he's not known. That's what God was missing, so to speak. The question then becomes, why aren't the higher worlds enough? Angels also know God. They know God better than we do. So why wasn't God satisfied with that? Okay, so we need another reason to explain why God created us. But generally speaking, the Zohar says, why was the world created? One of them was that that he should be known. So the fact that we sit here and study about God or meditate about, try to create this image of God and love him, That's, for that alone is enough. The purpose, we're fulfilling the purpose of creation. The fact that it will lead to a mitzvah, that's sort of a side benefit, at least in this modality. So if you ever study something and you don't see how in the world is this going to create emotion, or how maybe gives me another insight into some mystical level of God, it's fine. There's also benefit in learning that. The side benefit is your mind will create emotion. The more you think about it, the more you speak about it, you will start feeling it. And then the sky's the limit.